Hey everyone, and welcome back to Wood's Tiny Farm. I thought I would do a little Q&A video. It's been a while since I put out a video, but I have wanted to address just a lot of the questions I get as a microgreens grower. So I'm just gonna get right into it. Let's start with finances because that is, it's what people want to know. So someone asked me about my profit and my losses. So I'm gonna tell you straight up. Last year, 2024, I profited on average $500 a month. So when I filed my taxes, I figured out all of my expenses, all of that, and my profit was about $500 a month. Now that is with one client that is a grocery store. So, it's a business that can be duplicated. So if I had several stores that I was delivering to, that would be a fairly decent wage. But it's, at this point, it's just kind of a little bit of side money, hobby money. Okay, what insurance do I have? So I go through Flip Insurance. It's FLIP, and it's super easy to go on their website. You just put in all your info, and I was paying $300 a year for that. People want to know how much I charge for my containers of microgreens. So my 1.5 ounce containers, they have 1.5 ounces of microgreens in them. I have wasabi. So for the wasabis, I charge $4. Now this is kind of a bulk pricing deal. If I was selling straight to the end user, the consumer, I would be charging more. So the wasabi I charge $4 because the seeds are more expensive. I buy them through Johnny's. And for the spicy mix, the broccoli and the radish, I charge $3.50 for the 1.5 ounce containers, and those seeds are a little bit cheaper than the wasabi. I have 3 ounce containers of speckled pea and sunflower, and for those I charge $3.75 a container. I get a lot of people asking me about my watering setup. So I have kind of complained on here about microgreens being a ball and chain type business, which it is because someone has to check it every single day. And I've had people say, well, why don't you just set it up on an automatic timer? Which sounds good in theory, but I've heard of other people that did that, and some of their microgreens flooded. It was just, it's weird because I have certain trays on my rack that dry out faster than others, and it really depends on also the type of seed. Like the speckled pea right here, they suck up way more water than the others. So it goes on like a tray by tray basis. Sometimes I lift one up to water it and there's still water in there. Other times it's bone dry. So if I had it set up on a timer, I would run the risk of either flooding the seeds out, or I don't know. I didn't really like that idea. I didn't think it would work. You really have to have eyes on the trays every day. Okay, I've had people ask me how I set up my barcodes. So I go through, it's gs1 .com or .org. I can't remember. I have it on my website. And you just go in there, you buy your barcodes. They give you like a picture of your barcode. So if you're creating your own labels or sending that out to be outsourced, whatever, you can have your barcode put on your labels, which was nice. And so I paid for 10 barcodes. I paid $250 to buy them. And then you pay I was paying $50 a year to keep them up. Do I use any sort of mold control? So when I do have mold, if I do have mold forming, like sometimes with my sunflowers, after they're stacked, I will have like a little bit, you could see a little bit on there. So what I do is I have, I believe it's 12% hydrogen peroxide. I mix that with some water and I have a spray bottle, and then I will just spray that on my seeds and it takes care of it. There are other options I've seen, which I have not tried, but hydroponically I feel like the mold is not as bad as with dirt, because the dirt, there's just you know, the organic material and stuff, and you're just more likely to have mold. So I do recommend growing hydroponically. This way is so much easier and so much more cost effective. I've had a lot of questions about the silicone mesh that I use to grow hydroponically. So I'm just gonna show you right here. So these are wasabi seeds. And what I do is I have a bottom tray here, which is the white one. Obviously this one does not have holes. And then I have a black tray on top of that one that is the mesh, see, like that. And then I use a silicone mat in there, and that holds the seeds on top of this black tray, because I think people were confused. They're like, why can't you just put it on the black tray? Well, then all of the seeds would fall through those holes and it wouldn't work out. So you need something with smaller holes, which that's where the mesh comes in. So I use the silicone mats in my trays for 4 varieties. I have the wasabi, the spicy, the radish, and the broccoli. So I use those on those varieties. And then for my peas and my sunflowers, I do not use a silicone mesh pad at all. See how those roots just come through? Now, so I had someone ask me, well, why don't you use the silicone mesh for the pea and the sunflower? Because you don't need to. They fit on top of these black trays just fine, and then they have a really good root system on the bottom. So, and I just don't want more cleanup. So you don't need the silicone for the peas and the sunflowers, those big seeds like that. Do I really need to soak my seeds? I've had people say, well, you don't need to soak your seeds, which is probably true, but that's just how I started and that's just how I kept going. I personally never did it to where I didn't soak my seeds, so I never did any tests, but I would say if you're concerned, or if maybe you don't want to soak your seeds and you want to see how they germinate, if you don't soak them, do a test. Like, have one batch that you soak and one batch that you don't soak, and then see, you know, how fast they germinate and just compare that. And that was what I did with a lot of different things when I first started, was I just tested things. So I highly recommend just doing trial and error for yourself and seeing what works for you. What packaging do I use? So I have everything listed on my Woods Tiny Farm website. I'll put the link below and it'll take you to a page with all of my microgreens products there. And then I have the exact containers I use there, and then the exact labels that also fit on there. When I first started, I ordered the containers, and then I was nervous about ordering the labels because I wasn't sure if they were going to be too big, too small. You know, even with measuring, I'm like, I don't know what I should be getting. And so I kind of just winged it, but I wish that I could have found someone that said, this is exactly what I use. So I use 12 ounce deli containers for my smaller seeds, and that fits 1.5 ounces of microgreens. And then I use the 24 ounce deli containers for my peas and my sunflowers, and I put 3 ounces of each of those varieties in the containers. What kind of permit process did I have to go through? So in Montana, we don't have a lot of regulations at the level I'm on. So I believe it's if you sell $25,000 or more of produce a year, then you have to jump through more hoops. If you're not selling that much, you just have to fill out, a sheet on our Department of Agriculture website and just turn it in. And I think the first year I started, they charged me 20 bucks to do that, but the fee has been waived the last couple years, so it's free for me. But I think if you get up over 25,000 in sales here in Montana, you do have to have some sort of formal like produce training. I think they come actually to see your facility and everything, so it's a lot more There's a lot more red tape once you get into those numbers. So you're gonna have to check with your state's Department of Agriculture and just see what they need from you. I think a lot of states like, you know, Washington, California, New York, states like that might have a lot more strict rules, but here in Montana, they're a little more lenient. Do I put any sort of disclaimer on my packaging? Yes, I do. I do put on there wash before eating, although I don't think anyone washes them before eating. I heard that when I was first getting into this, they were like, you might want to put a disclaimer on there saying that. Technically, I don't think, like, if you're selling produce raw and you're saying wash before eating, then you don't really have many regulations. So if I were to market it as like fresh and ready to eat, already washed, then I would have to have an approved facility for that, like a commercial kitchen, which I don't, I don't want to go through that. So I just market it as wash before eating. They have the choice to wash it or not. And I also think in my state, they don't even require like using gloves or anything like that. And I mean, if you think about it, like romaine, you know, people are out in fields picking romaine. They're not wearing gloves. Like it's the same thing, basically. I do wear gloves, but I just think the rules, I don't know, it's just weird. You gotta look up the rules for yourself. What are my best sellers? So it's hard to say. Some weeks I'll sell out of one and there'll be a lot more left over of this one over here, and it's just kind of back and forth. But I think I could confidently say that spicy salad mix is probably people's favorite. They love broccoli too, and the radish. I would say my least favorites that people buy would be the wasabi, mustard, and the sunflower. And maybe people are put off by the wasabi mustard because it is a little more expensive at the store because I charge them more. So that could also be the case. What is my light cycle? So this is a question I get a lot. Right now I have it set at 16 hours of light and 8 hours of dark. Now, this is something that you should do trial and error for yourself. I've noticed that the longer they're without light, the leggier they will be. So sometimes they'll just get tall, but they won't really fill out. So try to figure out that sweet spot. I know for a while I was at 18 and, what is that? 18 and 8? 18 and 6. I was at 18 and 6. So just figure out that sweet spot for yourself and go with that. What kind of lights do I use? So again, I have everything linked over on my website. The link will be down below, but I did get these lights on Amazon and they work perfectly. So someone had mentioned if you put a third light in here, you'll get way better growth, which I probably would. I do have some extra lights, but I never even thought of that. So you could put 2 lights per shelf or 3 if you want to invest the extra money in the extra lights. How do I clean my trays? So when I am done harvesting, I will scrape off everything from the mesh pads, scrape off all the roots. I have a little scraper that I got from On The Grow. I will just scrape everything off, hose it off, and I bleach them like once a month, so you don't need to sanitize all the time, but you will want to sanitize because if you don't, you'll start to get mold. So I recommend at least once a month just soaking them in bleach water for at least 10 minutes and then rinsing well. And then every single week I do bleach my silicone mesh pads. So I'll clean all those off every week, and then I just soak them in bleach water for 10 minutes and rinse and dry. I've had a lot of people ask if they could make a full-time living selling microgreens, and I think it just depends. It depends on your area. It depends on if the market is saturated with growers already. I'm in a more rural area and my options are kind of limited with grocery stores. Like I guess I could have approached some people in the big city that's like an hour away, but I didn't want to have to drive there in the winter like every single week and stressed out about the weather and everything. So it really depends. There are some people that I followed on YouTube that they live in like a very populated area and then they would just go around and deliver people's, like they would subscribe. So they would subscribe for like 3 months or whatever and they would get something every week. And they would just go around in the city and deliver things and they were making really good money. So it just depends on your business model and where you're at and what the demand is. Just do the research and figure out who you can sell to, you know, restaurants and grocery stores. Maybe you want to sell at farmers markets. For me, I didn't want to do farmers markets because, you know, you grow a certain amount, you take it all down there. The stuff that you don't sell, it can go to waste. And it was just a lot of kind of unknown for me. I really liked working with the grocery store and they've been super nice because I can just sell what I harvest that week. He doesn't even place an order for like XYZ amount of units. Like he just says, just whatever you think, you know, if you're selling out of one earlier, just bring more, and so I just bring everything that I harvest and I stock it. And that's that. So anyways, you'll have to figure out the demand for microgreens in your area and see if that demand is already being met by other growers or if you can jump in there and try to make some money at this. How long do I keep my trays in blackout mode? So this is where you're gonna have to do trial and error again. I know I have a hard time giving a straight answer because this has kind of changed for me several times. So right now I plant on a Saturday and I unstack my trays on a Thursday. And then I leave them in blackout mode until Monday. So while they're stacked, I spray them every day with a water bottle. And then when they go into blackout mode, I don't even put trays over them anymore to keep them dark. I will just shut the blinds in the room and keep the lights off, and that is sufficient. And then I'll make sure they have a little bit of water too, because if they dry out, they will die. So yeah, anyways, trial and error, it depends. Right now they're only on lights, so I put them on lights on a Monday, and then I harvest them on a Thursday. So that's what, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They are only on lights for like 3.5 days, which is really kind of, you would think they would be on lights more, but I have found that this schedule has worked for me and it's taken some tweaking and some trial and error. Okay, can you grow microgreens in an outdoor greenhouse? Yes, absolutely you can if the temperature is controlled. So you will want to make sure that you can keep it around 70 degrees and that you can keep the humidity at a level that is not too high, not too low. So you want to be, I think, in between that, like around 50 to 60% humidity is good. 70 degrees at least to, I don't know, 76. I mean, you want to kind of keep it in there. They do like it a little more warm. I find that mine grow better when the room is warm. So yes, you can grow in an outdoor greenhouse, but it needs to be kind of controlled. You don't want it to get 100 degrees in there and you don't want it to get 30 degrees in there. So if you have that capability, do it. Do I like growing in soil or hydroponically better? I absolutely would choose hydroponically any day. So when I was selling, when I was growing with soil, I was spending $1 a tray for my soil. And so I'm growing 20 trays a week right now, which comes out to 20 bucks a week and 80 bucks a month. Now that was a huge expense. Growing hydroponically, I do buy like a mineral solution, kind of, I guess what you would say a fertilizer. It's like an all natural mineral solution, so nothing gross in it. But I use that, and I've actually done tests without using it, and I mean, if you're growing hydroponically, you need to add something to your water. So I highly recommend this stuff. It'll be linked, but yeah, so I save so much money growing hydroponically. I buy a gallon of this stuff and it lasts me, I believe, around 6 months. So, and it's like 60 bucks. So, I mean, I'm spending less in 6 months than I did in a month when I was growing in dirt. How much does it cost to start a microgreens business? So I spent a lot of money getting into it. I was still working a full-time job when I first got into this, and I felt like, you know, I might be leaving that job at some point, so I was trying to get myself set up. You know, I bought all my racks, I bought my trays, I bought seeds, and if you know me, you know that I buy in bulk. Like, I will not buy the 2-pound bag of seeds. I will buy the 25-pound bag of seeds. So, you know, that in itself costs, I mean, just in seeds alone, getting started, I think I spent over $1,000. Now, you don't have to do that. You can buy the smaller quantities if you want, if you're just getting started and you don't have all the disposable income. But I personally like to buy in bulk because you save money that way. So I want to say my startup costs were around like $5,000, $6,000. And I kind of spaced it out over a length of time. And then when I finally decided to go all in, that was when I purchased my insurance, and that was $300. And I bought my barcodes. So that was like the last 2 things that I did, because I wanted to make sure that I had like a contract with someone with the grocery store before I actually bought the barcodes, because I didn't want to pay for them if I didn't need them. So startup costs were a little bit, but you know, if you're gonna do this, you're gonna have to buy the racks and the lights and the seeds and the trays and all those things. And then you need to figure out like how many trays are you gonna be growing a week? And then you have to have like at least double that amount of trays, because if you're rotating things, so you've got to sit down and really crunch the numbers. Does growing hydroponically produce the same amount of yields as growing in dirt? I've gotten this question quite a bit. So I'm gonna say yes and no. So I used less seeds growing hydroponically than I did in dirt. And let's just take radish, for example. I used to use 50 grams of radish seeds per tray when I was growing in dirt, and that did awesome. Like, they were dense, they turned out perfectly. But I found with growing hydroponically, 25 grams is good. And I don't want it to be too dense, because that water will come up and they'll just be wet and it'll be hard to dry out. So when you're trying to harvest, you don't want them wet. So I use half the amount of seeds, and yes, I am getting less yield per tray, but you can just plant more trays to achieve the same yield. You know, maybe I'd have to plant 2 trays hydroponically for the radish to achieve what I would have had with 1 tray growing in dirt. But again, it's cheaper. You're not using any extra resources. Like, I'm not using the dirt, so I'm saving the money. And if you have the trays and you have the mesh pads, then you have everything that you need and you're not spending extra per tray. Okay, what seeding densities do I use? So I just told you what I use for radish. Broccoli, I do 20 grams per tray right now, hydroponically. Spicy salad mix and wasabi mustard, I do 15 grams per tray. And peas, I will weigh them out before I soak them, and I do 250 grams per tray. And sunflower, I also weigh them out before I soak them, and that is 125 grams per tray. So I did have a little bit of trial and error there. I found some cheat sheets online of seeding densities, And I just, you know, I kind of went with what they said and then changed it a little bit based on what I found out. Like if it was too dense, I cut it back a little bit, and that helped. So there's a lot of resources online that you can find. Just find things and try it out. So those are a lot of the questions that I get. I hope that answered some of your questions. I'm sure there's some stuff I didn't cover, and I kind of feel like I was all over the place. But if you have any other questions, you can comment below. I have all sorts of different videos on my YouTube, so go back and watch some of the other ones. I have one where I walk you through my whole process of growing, what I do each day. So there's a lot of info there. If you're getting started, just binge watch those and you should find some answers. So thank you for watching today, and I will see you on the next one.